All right, good evening, everyone. So we are going to talk about the very popular subject, the challenging subject, the subject with the most evangelism in it, nutrition and fueling. And this has come a little bit by request. As we launch into this, I should note for you guys that are live, we'll be diving into questions at the end of this. So I'm going to go through a presentation of about probably 15 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more than that, actually, probably 20 minutes. And then we'll have a really fruitful discussion. But what I want to frame tonight first, and I won't be looking at questions while we go, but what I want to frame is a grounding to hopefully help you guys develop your filter. Because I think more than potentially any subject that we talk about, there is a broad range of opinion on this, but there is also a massive amount of confusion because of pseudoscience. And so as we go today, I want to give you a backbone to start of some of the key components of when you think about your nutrition and fueling around performance in life and in sport. And so hopefully this gives you a little bit of perspective, and then we can go anywhere we want with the subject when we go into the Q&A following this presentation. And so as we get going here, there it is. And we think about nutrition as a subject. I think it's important for us to ground what we're after. It doesn't matter whether we're a world-class athlete, whether we're a fitness enthusiast, we are all sort of looking for improved performance. And we know that our mindset and our belief as a purple patch athlete is that we see equal weighting between the four pillars of performance. And so we have endurance, we have strength, we have recovery, and we have the subject of tonight, which is nutrition. And that is our focus, but we cannot ignore the context of the interrelationship between the other components. And under nutrition, we're specifically talking about fueling, so the calories that you're taking in during and immediately following exercise or training, your daily nutrition, your sort of breakfast, lunch, dinners, and snacks, and of course your hydration. And so as we think about this, I don't want you to completely ignore the value and importance of recovery, strength, or endurance. So I think it's important that we're kind of going down a rabbit hole today. We're talking about a subject, but anything we do in this subject is not going to be effective if it's not built within context of the bigger puzzle. And that's exactly the same if our subject tonight was going to be about endurance and we talked about training techniques in swim, bike, and run. If we have really poor recovery and nutrition, we're not going to maximize the yield. So I think it's important grounding that we should never forget. And every time we talk about one of the pillars, we have to almost show this slide right here to get us there. And so why is it important for you, the athlete, and the performance-minded individual globally? So the importance of nutrition is, number one, your health, your immune system, critically important to support just general daily living and health. It's also a key component to help with tissue repair and recovery in general as well. So a part of nutrition actually can fit under the recovery pillar while it sort of sits in its own pillar. It's really important to help with recovery and tissue repair, especially from the specific demands of the stress that we apply through this thing called training. Of course, a big component of that, while repairing from the specific stress, is thirdly, it provides the catalyst to yield adaptations from training. Now, adaptations is a really sexy word, but that is the route that we get stronger, fitter, more powerful, faster, etc. And so straight away, we're talking about repair and recovery and getting stronger so that we can produce more power on the bike, develop more resilience so that we can go longer, etc. But also we're thinking about just generally being a resilient human being with wonderful health, what creates as an athlete greater consistency and the ability to train harder. Nutrition also has a role, and we'll get into this later, around your daily energy management. So ignore training and ignore being up for training and getting the biggest yield from it. If you want to have your stable energy throughout the day where you can have clarity of thinking and focus, that you can make best decision making, where you can think clearly, think clearly, and navigate through, nutrition has a role in that. both in a positive and, if done poorly, a negative sense. And all of that wrapped together with nutrition being the backbone, and it is very, very simple once we really get down to it, but effectively adhered to, there is a correlation to a reduction of both injury, from an athletic sense, that's important, but also longevity, disease risk. High quality eating habits have been linked and associated with a reduction of the risk and the severity of diseases. And that goes all the way up to things like Alzheimer's. And so it's an important part of the performance puzzle. I think we all agree with that. It's not news for everyone, but I think it's a good grounding again for us to go through. Before we dive into the basics, let's get the recipe right. Pardon the pun, but let's get your recipe right. And when people think about nutrition as a subject, it's different for different people. But there are sort of three main components that we think about, three primary. The first is performance. I want to get faster, I want to be stronger, I want to qualify to Kona, or finish my first Ironman, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a performance component to it. And that's really prevalent as a priority for athletes. There is a health component to it, and everything we talked about, eat your greens, eat your veggies, lads, et cetera, wanting to have best immune system, best resilience, best support of health and energy management, et cetera. And then, of course, what people prey on is body composition, the magic world of diets and the catalyst to improve your body composition. But of those three components, what ends up contributing to positive results in any of them individually and all of them as a group is not just what you are eating. And so if we do go down the rabbit hole of thinking about, let's just use for an example, body composition, all of these off-the-shelves magic diets that you read online or in the books that have some magic catalyst of eating, it doesn't matter how well you eat on a day-to-day basis if you are living through a world of overload of stress. And if you're an athletic, exercising person, your fueling habits are bad. And I would add, one other catalyst, particularly for body composition, is the inclusion of strength training. I think it's absolutely critical component. And so when we think about these elements in the world of nutrition, it's not just about results from what you're putting in the body. It is the recipe of the combination of good habits around fueling. That's critically important, and we'll identify what that is and what that looks like in meal planning for you. Yes, how you go about eating and the breakfast, lunch, and dinners and snacks. But also, if you really want results, every human being, from professional athlete to fitness wannabe to general health enthusiast out in the world, should move heavy things. Strength training is really valuable and important. And finally, you can have those three elements, but if that bottom right on the screen is in overload, physical or emotional stress from poor sleep, emotional stress from arguments with spouse or stress at work or whatever it might be, that can be the undoing of all other good habits. And so similar to the 4 pillars, we need to remember that as we go through. So that's the 5 minutes of grounding. As it comes for an athlete, I think that your critical components, your building blocks in a way of performance nutrition are really broken down with 5 main elements. Fat, carbohydrate, protein, those are your macronutrients, and then 2 other elements, micronutrients and hydration. Now, we might actually add a 6th, which would be probiotics. Quite interesting, quite a lot of research on them, particularly for people that are traveling. There's a lot of interesting research coming out about those, but right now I'd stick to 5. Macronutrients, fat, carbohydrate, protein, and micronutrients, which we'll get into a little bit, and hydration. Those are your 5 components that we need to consider. Here's the headline news. And this is your first filter development when you start to assess any magical diet out there. We need every day all of these. We need every day all of these. And it's all about the source of where we get them and the timing. And that's what we want to get into today. And it's very simple, and there's a broad range of them. And so we need to understand, rather than me just sitting up here like an evangelical preacher, we need to understand why a little bit. And we need to break down each one of them really, really quickly and really simply. And I did this a little bit in the podcast a couple of weeks ago, but this is internal for Purple Patch athletes. So I want to get a little deeper into it. Let's first talk about your fuel sources as an athlete. And predominantly, importantly, you kind of have two places that you draw fuel from to navigate your day and navigate your training. The first is your gasoline, your high octane gasoline, carbohydrate. And your carbohydrate, the interesting part of that, and if you think about carbohydrate, that could be sugar and pastas and quinoa and vegetables and fruits, and there's a lot of sources of carbohydrate, but we utilize on a daily basis carbohydrate. It is essential for our role, and we're going to dig into it in a couple of seconds. But from a fuel standpoint, when you are at rest, or you're just walking along the street or going for a nice stroll, or even particularly as you start to get fitter, if you're performing low intensity exercise and training, riding on your bike with a friend for a couple of hours, just being conversational the whole way, as a relative to your fuel tank being emptied, carbohydrate has a relatively low contribution in ratio. So we're not actually getting that much from your carbohydrate store. Some, just sitting around here and me waving my hands around and talking in an animated way, but there's a lower contribution. When intensity is higher, so you're working harder, doing hill repetitions of running, or a threshold swim, or high intensity strength endurance bike. So anything that's moderate, strong but not breathless, up to high intensity, your contribution as a ratio from carbohydrate as your fuel source is very high. It's not maximal, it's high. It's very simple. High intensity, high contribution. We also have a finite fuel tank. We only store a certain amount of packages of fuel of carbohydrate. We call that glycogen, by the way, stored form of carbohydrate, stored in the muscle or in the liver. Your other fuel source is fat. Most of us feel like we have too much, but fat is a wonderful fuel source. And when we're sitting at rest, or we're walking along down to the shops, or we're riding our bike very easy, chatting to our friends for a couple of hours, there's a really high contribution from fat. And the fitter that we get, the more that we can draw on fat as a fuel source. It's a really good thing. And basically, it's enough to say it's a finite fuel source. It's never ending. And so it's a wonderful draw. We want to maximize the yield that we can. When intensity tips over a certain point and gets higher and higher, relative to state of fitness, et cetera, and you move to that moderate or high intensity, as I described above in the carbohydrate, there is still a moderate contribution from fat. It's not as high, but it still contributes at all intensity. There is a yield from fat. It's just less in a ratio standpoint, and it actually drops off in an absolute level as well. But we do have fuel sources to fuel our day, brain function, focus, decision-making from carbohydrate, and in exercise, carbohydrate just depends on how hard it is, and in all situations from fat. So they're both really important. Let's dig a little bit deeper and let's talk about your carbs first. So carbohydrate has a really important role for us. It is your fuel candy for your brain. The brain requires carbohydrate. Decision-making, concentration, motivation, focus, clarity of thought, long and short-term memory, sleepiness. We need carbohydrate to get through our daily function really well. period. It's also really important for our global function and our health. Carbohydrates are actually building blocks for our health. But we must also realize that not all carbohydrates are created equal in terms of value for us as athletes. And equally to that, we need to appreciate, and here's an important part for everyone, long-term, carbohydrates are an important part of your daily eating. And so today, we should say, every day you should get a good contribution of your daily eating diet from carbohydrates. The key question, though, is what type of carbohydrates? Because a Coca-Cola is carbohydrate, a Snickers bar is carbohydrate, a big white loaf of bread is carbohydrate. But in general, we want to have more robust and less processed carbohydrates as the backbone of our daily eating. And the great choices of that are fibrous whole grains, sweet potatoes, quinoa, amaranth, etc. There's lots of really good whole grain breads, whole grain pastas, wild rices, etc. that we should lean into as an emphasis. Notice that right now I'm ignoring fruits and vegetables, which are strictly carbohydrate, but we're going to come to those in a little while. And so in general, if you can lean into daily eating around these types of carbohydrates every day, and I'm going to explain well, you have better chance for health, performance, recovery, focus, energy balance, etc. But in daily life, and in fact, in the vast majority of our training, particularly in the vast majority of our training for you guys, time-starved athletes, we want to limit or even avoid really high octane carbohydrates. Sugar, Coke, Cliff Bars, chews, gels, white pasta, white bread, etc. It doesn't really have a role in our daily life. If training becomes long enough or high enough intensity, and then sports nutrition, as we call it that, so gels, blocks, and everything else, yes, they have a role. But any session under 75 minutes in duration, 60 to 75 minutes, it's very rare that you need to have any calories during the session at all. And particularly, you don't need to have, unless you're feeling a little empty for some reason, you don't need to contribute from any particularly highly caloric drinks that are sugar-based or from any sports nutrition. So when we talk about carbohydrates, the robust carbohydrates in this category and lens we're thinking about it, we're thinking about whole grains, wild rice, sweet potatoes, quinoa, amaranth, etc. And there's a whole list of them that are more robust in nature and slightly slowly in absorption and synthesization. And they're really healthy, and in fact, they're critical. And so that's the carbohydrate. When we think about fat, fat has a critical role. Yes, it's a great fuel source, but a good yield or introduction of fat into our daily diet is really going to help. Here's some good things: your overall body function, your immune system. As we talked about, it's a critical fuel source for all components of life. But by thinking about fat, and particularly if you're around my generation, where we got grown up, where we were raised, we got grown up, where we were raised being told fat is bad for you, fat is going to make you fat. You need to avoid the fish and chip shop, yes, but we want to avoid highly processed foods. And so just like carbohydrates, fat are not created equally. Trans fats, we want to eliminate them from the diet. Highly saturated fats, we want to really limit them as much as possible. Everything in moderation, including excess. Sometimes a good plate of fish and chips is wonderful, some French fries is good. But as a general rule, we want to lean more into the healthy oils and fats, the monounsaturated fats. And that includes things, as I say at the bottom, such as flaxseed and avocado, really oily fish like salmon or herring or things along those components. Olive oil that is copious in amounts over every salad that you eat. And so you should load up on the oils at the right time, guilt-free. And that's going to be a wonderful component for your immune system, your state of recovery, and your performance in life. And so carbohydrates and fat, neither of them are dirty words. Both of them are critical, and we need to eat plenty of them. Just make sure that we lean into mostly the right types. And there's big families in anyone. It shouldn't be religion and avoidance, but it should be generally straying towards more on this side and generally straying more on the other side. There is one other macronutrient, the one that we haven't talked about, and it's protein. This is your pathway to recovery and adaptations. And so in fact, we started with our fuel source, we started with fat and carbohydrate, but at central on our meal plate, every meal plate, as you're going to find out, is protein. It is critical. These are, there's only no other way to say it, your building block of performance, protein. They should be the bedrock of every single meal that you eat. And they're really big catalyst for tissue repair and recovery. They are also important for adaptations, the growth of the muscle to get stronger, fitter, more powerful, etc. And also, not included on the side, are the great source of energy management. If you're exercising in the morning, I've spoken about it before, but high levels of stress hormones to help you perform, cortisol is a wonderful stabilizer of energy, bringing cortisol levels down to a stable environment so that you're not anxious in flight or fight syndrome as you're going into your work day or day of obligations. And so protein are the great sponge, the great building block that everything else gets built around. And the key thing to understand about proteins that we all must admit here is vegans are scum. No, I'm joking, 100%. I have nothing against vegans whatsoever. And I think it's important to talk about this a little bit. You can absolutely be successful as an athlete, a high-performing athlete, as a vegan, 100%. But we also have to acknowledge that if you're choosing that way of eating, and there's nothing wrong with it, and if you feel better, you really should do it, we must acknowledge that it does just take more planning and work. You do actually have to invest. You do need to be thoughtful, because if we really buy into the fact that proteins are important, we have to understand that there are foods that deliver complete proteins, which is essentially all of the 20 amino acids, the family of amino acids that make up a complete protein. Some foods deliver all 20. So just by choosing a breast of chicken, you get all 20 amino acids, and that's great. In a vegan lifestyle or in other components, you have to combine foods in a really thoughtful way and make sure that you're getting your 20 amino acids, not necessarily in every meal, but spread across the whole day, every day. And so a great example of that is pita bread with hummus becomes a complete protein. Rice with certain types of beans becomes a complete protein. So it's completely doable, but that lifestyle, it does take more thought and planning. So if we remove the ethics side of becoming vegan, if you're the person that needs quick meals, doesn't like to think, doesn't engage in thinking of food as artistry and a journey to go on that's wonderful to explore, maybe that diet isn't the best approach for you. But even if it isn't, and you explore and you enjoy animal products, as I do, and I eat meat and I eat eggs and I have dairy, we still, on that side of the equation, you need to ensure that you're getting bountiful amounts of fruits and vegetables. And so if you do utilize or consume animal products, it's the easier route to get in each meal your 20 amino acids, which are your building blocks of complete proteins. And so those are your three macronutrients, and you need all three of them. And there has never been, and there still is not a diet where elimination or great restriction of any one of these over the long term is proven to be healthier, higher performance creating, and ultimately promotes the best health that we can possibly get. And so we want to include all three in a meaningful, simple, and practical, habitual way into your performance lifestyle. So we've talked about fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Rather than having exercise, let's just go through the final two very quickly. Micronutrients. So those are your vitamins and minerals. And of course, that's your fruits and veggies. Now, strictly speaking, fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates, but they are the carbohydrates that contain a high degree of vitamins and minerals that make up a lot of our cellular function and other body functions in our body. And so I believe that they deserve the category of their own. To help with confusion, we separate them out. You've got the building block carbohydrates that are more robust, let's call it a sweet potato, and I know that's a vegetable, strictly speaking, as well. And then you've got your micronutrients, your fruits and veggies. Consume as many as you like most of the time, one exception. You want to eat a full rainbow. What's the full rainbow? You want to have a big mixture of vegetables and fruits that come from a wide different source of colors. Leafy greens are obviously wonderful. Tomatoes, or tomatoes as I'd like to say, are wonderful for leucine and other vitamins. Carrots are really good. There's a broad range, and they should be in every single meal. They are the catalyst of your health. And the final component, hydration. Critical for sports performance, absolutely essential for focus and attention and reduction of sleepiness. Really important for repair and adaptation. So it's not just protein, it's protein in the presence of hydration state that's going to optimize your adaptations and recovery. A backbone of your immune system, and also a catalyst, if necessary, if for some people that it's appropriate for portion control and food choices to adhere to the advice that I gave earlier. If you are dehydrated in daily life, it is much more likely you're going to lean into white breads and pizzas and pastas and cokes and cookies and donuts than it is if you are going to be hydrated. Because dehydration creates cravings for sugar and high hunger signals. It's quite interesting. So remain hydrated. And when we put that puzzle together, it becomes really powerful. Now, there's no meal plan in here so far. There's no obsession around elimination. There's no magic catalyst, because there is no magic catalyst. And the biggest component, as we pause right now before I give you a little bit of insight into how you plan your meals, is remember this when you read about the next magic diet. When you start to filter through and people say you need to go low carb or low fat or reduce protein, whatever it might be, remember that this magic word that is overused, balance, is really important, but performance nutrition always focuses around these key elements, and it stayed pretty much the same all the way through. We have a saying at Purple Patch, nail the basics. These are the basics. These are the basics right here. So how can we make your meal planning as simple as possible? I hope that I don't confuse here. I'm hoping to make it simple. This is a little new. It's the same thing described a different way, because I like to try different ways of explaining. In your daily eating as an athlete, you have two types of meal. You have a performance meal, and you have a meal for your health. That's the way that you think about it, or you can think about it. This might be helpful for you. So what we have is we have 5 blocks, the 5 things that we talked about: protein, carbohydrate, fats, micronutrients, and of course your hydration. Those are the 5 components. And so your performance meal is the type of meal that you consume when it's anchored around performance. And we are either looking to perform in the work day, so get up and forget about exercise. You're taking a complete rest day, but you are fueling your body to perform while sitting at your desk, or working in the car mechanic shop, or standing in front of the classroom as a teacher, or being a nurse, whatever it is, you are looking for optimal energy and focus and decision making throughout your work day. So that's the first place that we would utilize a performance meal. The second place that you would utilize a performance meal is the number one habit for all athletes, which is consuming calories immediately following a workout within 30 to 45 minutes. It's a performance meal every time. That's one type of meal. And of course, the focus or the mission of a performance meal is to provide the body with the building blocks to recover and stabilize energy throughout the day. That's one. And to give you energy for the rest of the day so that we can limit stress, stabilize energy, maximize our performance and our ability to think and perform and recover for the next session. And so that's number one, performance meal. We can plug that in. We'll talk about what it constitutes in a second. Your second type of meal, there's only two. Your second type of meal is the meal designed purely for health. So what we're looking for there is we're not worried about fueling energy. We're not worried about maximizing performance during or following a workout. What we're looking to do there is build up our immune system, maximize our cellular function, develop us for repair and recovery as we're sleeping at night. So it is the backbone of being a really healthy human being. So they're not that different, but the way that you build a performance meal, and this is where you want to listen a little bit, is if you're going to build your plate of food, the way that you build a performance meal, which is when you get up in the morning and have breakfast, or the meal or snack following a workout, you build it like this. Number one, your protein. Remember, it's the building block. So you start with the protein. Where am I getting my protein from? Is it shrimp or egg or animal product or rice and beans or tempeh or tofu? Where am I getting my protein from? Number one. The second thing is that we are stocking our energy to maximize brain function or restock our muscles from what they have expended during the workout. So the second component that I put on is my robust form of carbohydrate. And so is that whole grain tortilla? Is it a sweet potato? Is it quinoa? Is it some form of building block of high quality recovery? Now, you might love pasta and it's okay to consume pasta sometimes. You might love normal potatoes or white bread and it's okay to consume it sometimes. And this is the place, if you are going to consume it, to do it in either the morning for your breakfast or post-workout. So those are your first two building blocks. Then on top of that, you want to add some micronutrients because they're really important. Now, the reason that the focus is shrunk a little bit in this diagram is because the one catalyst for this is that we want to avoid having too many antioxidant or heavy berries and components like that in our post-workout meals. And so that's the one component that we think about is don't be too heavy in our performance meals on components like berries. And so we just shrink it. We still want to have vegetables. It's great to have avocado with our eggs and our tortilla in the morning, but it isn't central to the plate. We shouldn't avoid, but we don't want to have too many fats. Okay, so the performance meal isn't the place that you're necessarily having a big leafy salad with all of the grains and lots of cranberries and berries and components like that in it. Fats become a backseat. And then every time you're having a snack or meal, you're having hydration. 1 or 2 glasses of water with every meal. So that's a performance meal. Okay, your health meal, very similar. It just flips in emphasis. You begin, what's my protein? What am I going to build this meal plate around? So that's your protein. Again, it can be shrimp or salmon or herring or hamburger or tempeh or tofu or rice and beans, whatever it is. Then the second component is my micronutrients. As many fruits and vegetables as you can pile on. And because it's a health meal, those become the replacement for any carbohydrate or most of the carbohydrate. You then have lots of good oils and fats, olive oil, avocado, different types of cheeses, plenty of opportunities to have fats. And of course, some of your protein is going to have fats in, such as salmon. And this type of meal can have a very low emphasis on carbohydrate. You need very few or sometimes no robust carbohydrate. So when you have your evening meal, if you've worked out in the morning, you don't need too much carbohydrate. You don't need to eliminate, but that's the difference between having pasta with some salmon in at night and having salmon and broccoli and a little side of half a bread roll. And then, of course, every single time, hydration. And so when you break it down and make it really simple, it's like, have I got a performance meal that wraps up performance recovery as well? Or is it a meal of health? One of two choices, that's all you're doing. And so when you look at it, and this gets pretty small for you, but in the morning, this is case study number 1, in the morning, going down the page to the evening. In the morning, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna do my morning workout, which a lot of people do. It's particularly time-starved people. I get up and I work out between 6 and 7, and then I have my breakfast and go to work. Your breakfast will be a performance meal. Protein, carbohydrate, some vegetables, potentially, and fruit, and that's great. Not too much fat, plenty of hydration. Off you go. And hydration can include coffee, 100% in the morning. And then for the rest of the day, you might have a snack, but it's not going to be carbohydrate heavy. That's going to create an energy spike and crash. And so it's going to be more of a health snack. And so it can be more hummus with vegetables rather than a sandwich with almond butter in or something. At lunch, you can have soup and a salad and a little side of rice or a roll, but you don't need to make it the predominant feature. Your health snack again, and then in the evening, you can have very few carbohydrates in general. And so if you work out in the morning, it becomes a really easy control measurement. But what about the athlete that is not working out in the morning? Instead, they work out in the evening. Well, it becomes a little bit different. They require more performance meals, and nothing's going to change on their body composition. They're not failing. They're just providing the body with the calories that they need to stabilize performance throughout the workday and still perform well at night in their session. So they wake up, and our parents used to say, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And so you start the morning with a performance meal. Protein, carbohydrate, vegetables or fruit, not too much fat, a little bit. Hydration, it's always there. You have a health snack. You have a normal health-based meal. And so you don't need too many carbohydrates. That morning breakfast, you want breakfast and you want to have it to fuel the day. That's still fueling you. Remember, carbohydrate is a fuel source that is low contribution when you're at rest. And so we're not burning many carbohydrates. The demand is not there. But now I'm getting ready to do an evening workout. And so some people might need a snack in the afternoon, and some people that are typically more carb burners might need a performance snack, might want to have 2 or 3 hours before their workout, a little snack that's got more of an emphasis of carbohydrate, very individual. But then workout in the evening, guess what you have to do? You've got to replenish the burnt calories, and therefore it is appropriate after your evening workout to have a performance meal. Protein, carbohydrate, some vegetables and fruit, not too much fat, plenty of water, not so much that you have to get up and pee 4 times in the night, Marty. And so that's the overall emphasis. It becomes at least middle of our bell curve. That becomes our anchor point. That's how we manage it. And so I think if we get out of today 5 things: carbohydrate, fat, protein, micronutrients, hydration. We build all of those into daily life. The question is how and on timing. And we already have 2 things. Is this meal a performance meal? And there's a whole broad range where you can get them from. There's no magic diet. But if it's a performance meal, I know that that meal has a purpose that provides carbohydrate and protein and a little less emphasis on maybe fruits and vegetables and certainly fat. If it's a health meal, my body doesn't need carbohydrate, the robust carbohydrates in this. So the emphasis is quite simply protein, tons of good fats, and a massive amount of fruits and vegetables to help us. And we can put to the side the emphasis of pastas and breads and quinoa and just have a little side of it and keep up with hydration. And so guys, that is your filter. That's the starting point of performance nutrition. And I don't think it typically gets more complicated than that, but it doesn't mean I've answered everything. And so we're going to go to questions now. I'm just about to stop sharing, but I want to start with a question. I'm not sure if Mark is live today, but he did put in a question in advance. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to put him on the slides. So in short, his question is, what about if I do 3 workouts a day? What should I do here? So Matt talked about how to fuel after a workout and for health, but not sure if you have to fuel for 3 workouts. For example, after my swim, I'm going to have breakfast. At lunch, I do strength. And before supper, I do a bike and a run workout. So are they all of these meals considered post-workout fuel? Or is there anything sort of different from what I suggested? Well, it's quite simple. He is elevating cortisol and burning calories 3 times a day. It doesn't mean that he has to sit down with a big bowl of pasta 3 times a day. But what he is doing is he is having performance meals 3 times a day. Performance meals 3 times a day. So that's the way that you would do it. And the snacks in between are health. So the only thing that I might work out is in one of those meals, you have to ensure that you're getting big vegetables, and probably before the evening workout, when you finish, it might be a little tempered on the carbohydrate. You're still having it as a contributor because you have to refuel, but you must introduce more calories in that. I also think that if anyone is doing 3 workouts a day every day, which I don't think Mark is here, by the way, but anyone that was doing 3 workouts every day, there's a challenge in another pillar, which is the endurance training and the puzzle and the recipe of training globally. So that's my quick and dirty. I'll stop sharing, and I know that we've got some chats here. We've got one more from Paraguay. How's it going? We've got Marty from Nuevo, New York. Who would like to go first with questions? Juan from Paraguay, if you have a question, feel free to speak loud. I'm not sure if he's, oh yeah, he's still on here.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yeah.
Awesome. Well, very nice to finally get to meet you, air quotes, in person, Matt. I've been a follower for a few years now, and I just started with the squad about a week ago, not even like 4 days. So I'm very, very excited. And I do have a question. Actually, it's kind of like 1.5. So usually my previous coach would suggest that I do some of my endurance rides on zone 2, deprive it from calories. And not that he was into the keto nor the low carb, high fat approach, but simply because trying to mimic what, economy racing and fat metabolization would be. And so sometimes I would do an hour on zone 2 in the indoor on a Friday morning without any carbs whatsoever, just plain water. So I know that you're not keen of it, and I've been trying to get as much of the mindset of the 4 pillars that you keep talking about, which I love. But I do have a question in regards to whether, let's say, you would have a spoon of sugar and then immediately afterwards get into the bike in a sort of workout that would not require as much carbs or the sort of effort that would require drawing energy from carbs. Would that mean that my body, since I did have carbs about 15 minutes ago, would that mean that my body would pick and choose whether to draw energy from fat, or would that mean that because I did have carbs and a spoonful of sugar 15 minutes ago, my body would say, no, even though you're doing a steady hard zone 2 ride, you would not benefit from burning fat. Here's your glycogen.
Yeah, firstly, welcome to the squad, and thanks for thank you for trusting us, and welcome to the team. It's a big question to unpackage. We have done.
I apologize.
No, it's a great question. It's a wonderful question. There's a lot of roads to go down. Let me answer the fasted workout first, and let me put it in context. What I'm a massive fan of first is athletes, and this goes all the way up to elite athletes. Athletes repeatedly doing the things that are going to get them to 95 to 97% of great performance really, really well. And I would say that of all the athletes, including all of the professional athletes that I've worked with, less than 1% master the most important basic elements of all aspects of training to get them 95% of the way there. And that's because they are drawn into this incremental world of things that are theoretical, etc. And so I tend to always stray to like repeatedly get the basics right. And once you repeatedly get those right, and then you can experiment in adding or subtracting in this case being fasted workouts or training at altitude, etc., etc. And so I should preface it with that. The second thing then is, okay, in the lab, in the research, when you put an athlete in a fasted state, they do draw on fat utilization. So there is a theoretical place for that. But it is only in the big picture when athletes, there's a second challenge when it comes to the applied side of that in the real world, is the majority of athletes have a really hard time getting the calories in to support the amount of training that they're doing. And so as soon as you start to put them into a high stress environment in a world where they're already navigating a whole bunch of life stress and they tend to be undercaloried, any positive theoretical application is often negated. And so typically we don't use it because of the risk-reward benefit. If the athlete is really stable, really healthy, has lots of time, is not overstressed, and then to get to the last part of your question, we might periodically use it, and it tends to be more on the elite athletes. And we have them wake up and do it. Never a female athlete. It's really bad hormonally for a female athlete, but some of the male athletes put them into a fasted state at low intensity and refueling with either no or low calories, and any calories that we refuel is real food, using things like eggs over a 2 or 3 or 4 hour bike ride, as you say, keeping it all zone 2. We do not want to start that ride with sugar. You want to avoid that as soon as you're giving it the fuel up front. And I'm not up to date on the latest physiological research on this, and I should be, but I'm not. But as my understanding is, that would negate the effect. So if anyone is going to do it, they would want to do it in short workouts. They would want to limit carbohydrate, all at low intensity, but still have a performance meal following 100% every time, period. Always refuel afterwards. Is it something that I recommend for athletes to do? Absolutely not. If you're exercising 75, 90 minutes or less, you typically don't need calories. Sometimes you need calories just to get through, but always refuel on it following. But if you are going out, just to follow, if you are going out to an endurance ride with your friends over the winter months, as you call it, eat real food, trail mix, boiled eggs, etc. You don't need to be, on the other flip side, pumping yourselves of blocks and gels on long endurance rides. So that's and I put you back on mute just for in terms of audio, Juan, but I hope that helps. That's a good question. Les had a good question here. Does any of this change as we get older? A lot of things change when you get older, that's for sure, and we've done it. And I sit here as a still relative puppy at 45 years of age, but a lot of things change as we do get older. But our actual utilization of calories in the performance versus health meal, you keep it the same. I would say the thing that becomes more important is we don't synthesize carbohydrate as easily, and but we still need carbohydrate. And so I think you get penalized when you're older for poor food choices more. So the Cokes, the pastas, the white breads, the overconsumption of starchy carbohydrate, you get penalized more for that. But you also get penalized if you put yourself in a starvation mode more. And so I would say just the importance of really robust, healthy eating and the range of what you get away with really narrows. Versus when you're young, one of our team members today was talking about, he was a rower, a collegiate rower, drinking 6 Cokes at 6 p.m. at night. Boom, boom, boom. Imagine if we did that now. I think any of us would say we'd explode with energy and we'd explode our belt line. But when you're 22 and you're rowing, nothing happens. And so I think that broad range starts to narrow. But the actual concepts of your needs and your building blocks and your performance meal stays exactly the same. It's just that we get a little bit of less luxury, I guess. Jess, firstly, I should say, I'm really sorry I missed you. Next time you've got to tell me you're coming to San Francisco before the day. So I'm sorry that I didn't get, I wanted to see you swimming. I didn't know you were there. Okay. The one Tuesday and Thursday swim that I was out of town for, so I apologize.
I'll be back. And
that's what Arnie said.
Yeah.
So anyway, it would have been fun. But your question is, shall I read it or would you like to ask it? You're muted now, so I'm going to let you ask it. Go ahead.
It was just about morning swims. So for breakfast, I get kind of nauseous if I try to get some protein and carbs in, but that's what Kyla recommended. And so I was just wondering if it's an intense swim, is it more important to hit the intensity or to do the fueling with the carb and protein?
It's always important to do the intensity, like the prescription of the actual workout. Following, there is what the science says and what are the best choices, and then there is the applied side of everything. And so the journey for you is what works, what can I get in? And so if you talk to any dietitian and they say, this is the magic recipe, you need to have whole wheat tortilla with eggs and avocado, and this is your magic diet, and you think the only thing I can consume is literally a scoop of almond butter and a Coca-Cola, that's what you eat. It's that habit, and then you say that's what it is at the start of the day, obviously that being an extreme. And then what you do afterwards is your snack that maybe is an hour or two later, you just get enough calories to get you over. You know, it's almost like a recovery shake or something like that. And then eat your real breakfast an hour or two later if you can. Okay.
Awesome.
And
sorry, can I ask a quick follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
She also recommended more carbs in a workout, but is that, you think, a female-specific thing?
Female athletes tend to require more carbohydrates in workouts globally, yeah. And there's a whole host of reasons for that, but including hormonal stabilization, yeah. I still think that it's a really young science and it's dead true. You still need to find what works for you, no matter whose situation. And in fact, that's the same as gospel of anything. Let's take like my prescription of training. Wow, I'm trusting Matt and the workout 100%, but But ultimately, if something is not really working and you're continually failing at a particular recipe, either order of workouts or what a particular session is, there might need to be adaptations. And as you learn yourself, it's okay to have that leeway. And you should hear my petulant pros that say that workout is not good for me. I guarantee it's not good, and I listen. Now, in this environment, that's really hard to listen on an individual basis, but there's still an element of control and responsibility, and I wouldn't in anything in life just follow complete gospel, even though we still say, and it is critically important, follow the plan, follow the plan. It's not, I don't like doing hill repeats, so I'm going to go down to the track and do a track session, but you sort of get the image there. So yeah, carbohydrates are a bit important. I would still say workouts under an hour, you don't need calories afterwards. One thing that women do need, globally much more than men, is a little snack before the morning workout. That becomes more important for women. Male athletes don't need it. They sort of have, they're lucky they get away with it a little bit more. But Steve asked a question which is related to this, so I'll just transition. He eats a picky bar. Jesse Thomas will be very happy, but eats a picky bar before morning workouts, as I'm too hungry and really need it for the energy when I wake up. Is it good or bad? It's great. It's one of those things that it works. But if you think about a picky bar, it's got carbohydrate, which is good, a little bit of fat and some protein in there. For some people, the high fructose in there does havoc on their stomach and it doesn't work. For other people, it's wonderful. So it's what works for you. I tend to be a person, and it's not, I don't say this sort of like, look at me, I'm great, because you don't want to follow half of my habits, but I tend to be a person that really has never done well consuming calories before any type of workout. I really don't do well on it. So I tend to train on an empty stomach, or I have calories and then I wait and then I train several hours later. But the vast majority of people do better from consuming calories and then going to train out. It's just what calories suit and fit without churning the stomach upside down. So it's very individual. So Steve, I think the picky bar is great, particularly if it works for you. It's really good. Marty, you've got a good question. Is there a general wait period between a meal and a subsequent workout? Again, a little bit individual. For many athletes that don't do well with full stomachs, and then sometimes with blood sugar stability, some people tend to eat a meal, and if they work out within an hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours, they'll often get a bonking sensation where they feel like they have no calories. So it tends to be a real meal. It's at least 2, if not 3 hours before, and it's on a continuum. Other people can eat a meal and work out 30 or 60 minutes following. I would say globally, best performance in training comes off of a stomach that is not full. And so for that reason, it's typically better to have, if you do perform well off of calories without that sort of crashing, almost hyperglycemic type feeling, you should lean into having just a smaller snack and then a bigger meal. I tend to prefer big meals afterwards or big meals pretty far away from sessions. I'm just going down the list here, guys, so we can, while we're talking and we're making it a bit more webinar-like. But Julie, good question here. You mentioned it's okay to have a coffee in the morning after a workout. What are your thoughts on caffeine on training days versus racing days? Is it better to have less caffeine when training and taper caffeine for race day? Caffeine is a performance enhancer. It's a recovery enhancer. Post-workout caffeine is really good to help the absorption of carbohydrates. Caffeine is good in the morning, as long as for most people. Some people have a hyperreactive, some people are less sensitive. Caffeine in the afternoons and evenings for many people tends to be a negative because of disruption of sleep, which in the big picture is obviously not good. And so in general, I don't drive people to taper caffeine and have the negative effect. I tend to look for that magic word, consistency. And from a physiological standpoint, we don't utilize caffeine in performance racing to just get a buzz. it creates that, but you're getting the physiological uptake of glucose much quicker. So the real physiological benefit is happening anyway. So some people like it from an emotional standpoint. Some people like the, woof, I'm getting a rocket ship, but that's mostly placebo. And so in general, I would maintain your regular caffeine habits. And the only thing I'd say about caffeine is only bad or is bad when it disrupts your sleep. And so in taper, when training comes down, it's not a bad idea to reduce it so that you can get in the rested state, but you don't want to get into a hyper stress state where you're getting headaches and things like that. So that's a good question. We have 5 minutes. Chad, you got a question around fueling on the bike for Ironman. You got a big Ironman next week. It is really, really hard for me to give you a specific Ironman goal.
Come on, Matt.
Yes. Let me ask you this. How much do you weigh, Chad?
200.
200 pounds. Okay. How many calories an hour would you plan to have?
Boy, I'd like to get in 300 to 400.
Which is on the high end. So I'll say this to you. It is better to be just under the radar and slightly under-fueled than it is to be slightly over-fueled, because the key thing about an Ironman or half Ironman bike performance is that you want to keep the stomach clearing. And as the stress goes on, your absorption rates gets lower. And if you are slightly under-fueled, as long as you have an awareness and management mindset, and as you're going through, if you start to feel slightly moody or grumpy or loss of focus or like, well, I don't feel good, add some more calories in and the energy can come back up, and that's always able to be resurrected. But as soon as you're putting in too many calories and the stomach isn't clearing, it takes a long time to get those clear. And they're just sitting in the stomach like chicken casserole. And that's not a good thing. And quite often that is coming out. And it's coming out one of two places, and I'll let you lose your imagination. Good.
I've had the opposite challenge with just getting fuel. So I think my goal was to get, to plan on more, realizing I'll probably get in less than I
probably
planned. Yeah.
The key is consistency, awareness, and supporting the caloric intake with hydration is what I'd say.
Okay, and trying to feed off the feeding stations, trying to figure out a way to do that.
It is optimal. Again, it's really individual. We will be doing a whole fueling thing around racing, but it's really, but yeah, I will put it this way. The more that you can utilize from stuff that you don't have to carry, the better. But again, there are some athletes that go the whole way. I do think that there are challenges of athletes that think that the only solution for them is they have to carry everything, including all of their hydration, because as soon as that goes wrong, they're in real trouble. So you've got to have flexibility, and you've also got to have the ability to say, well, this isn't working for me, but I can take that gel, and that might be different. So similar to someone getting a GPS and going straight off a cliff because it tells them to go there. You don't want to do that in your nutrition as well on the bike.
Okay, that's what I'm going to try to do. And what's your opinion of Vegemite?
Vegemite, it's not as nice as Marmite is my overall solution, but it's a wonderful, during a race, Chad, or?
Yeah, they're offering it at the Ride nutrition station.
You must be doing Western Australia. You're not doing Cozumel, yeah? I never thought about that. That might be interesting for people that are a little bit crampy. I can probably see why they're doing it, and a little salty. That might actually, at the right time, taste quite good if you like it.
That's what I'm thinking.
So it's funny. I staggered and fumbled my way through I hate coaches that talk about themselves and their performance, by the way, but here I am tonight. But I stumbled through the North Face marathon. And the one thing, like very, very quickly, the sweetness of anything was abhorrent to me. And you end up using orange slices and bananas and chips and pretzels, and it really worked. You know, chicken soup is always the old classic favorite, but there's a reason that it's good. So I can imagine Vegemite sandwiches. In fact, I never run with solids. I had peanut butter sandwich. I had a little, corner of it. I had 3 of those during the race, and it was fine on my stomach because I was going. But so my guesstimate would be that might be interesting.
It will be. I'll let you know. I'll give it feedback.
Give us all feedback, but I will say one thing for like the full-blooded Southern American, probably not a good thing. But we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Matt.
Good man. Good man. Best of luck down there. Make sure you look out for Sarah Piampiano and Sam Appleton. Go and say hi to them and tell them you're Purple Patch. But it's Sam's first Ironman, so he's going to be the pro with his knees touching because he's so nervous that he won't be able to stand up properly because it's.
That's what I heard. We'll do.
Any last questions? I'm a little bit over here, guys, but I always love these sessions. It sounds like we can do a whole another session just on Q&A with nutrition and fueling, and certainly some extensions off of this. But I appreciate it. And Rob, I will say I saw your note. Thank you very much. But I will. I don't see any other questions up there that I missed. So guys, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. I will do one courtesy thing, which is a courtesy. It's not full of pressure, but it is the November the 21st right now. And so November the 24th, if you do want Purple Patch gear, November the 24th, the store closes. So we will not be carrying inventory. So if anyone does want Purple Patch gear, it's time to order. And we go from there, okay? And it's quite nice stuff. Lightning bolts is the theme this year. So, all right, troops, thank you very much for joining. Appreciate all the questions and engagement. Really enjoyable. These sessions give me energy. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Take care.